All right, guys, ready or not, it's Olla day. The high is only forecast to be 91 today, so I got to make hay while the sun shines. And it's muggy out here, but it's not going to be as hot as usual. So today's the day. I'm going to work on that Olla, try to get that Ancient Pottery Challenge finished up. Got 2 more to do. I've got the Olla, and I've got to redo the ladle. So today's the day. Let's get that Olla done. If you don't know what the Ancient Pottery Challenge is, that's that list of 10 unique pottery forms from the ancient Southwest that I'm trying to recreate this season. If you want to see the video on that, I'll put the link to it right up here for you. So that concludes the building portion of this jar. It took me a number of hours. I didn't really keep track. I kept going inside and coming back out, and going inside, letting it rest for a while, coming back out. Let me just wrap up this segment by sharing with you some notes I wrote down on building large forms. So 4 tips for if you're building a large coil form. First of all, start thicker at the bottom and get thinner at the top. That is the thickness of the walls of your pot. So when your walls are down here where it's really wide, there's not a lot holding them up except their own strength. And so if you have trouble with your clay kind of going floppy or falling over, use a thicker form at the bottom to give it extra strength. As you get to the top, you can build thinner, and that makes it lighter, so there's less weight pressing down on the lower portions. And also, it doesn't need the same strength. Once you start closing in that form, it's resting on itself. It's not so easy to tip over when you have a smaller opening. But when those walls are standing out here like this, it's very easy for them to go over. So you can build thinner because you don't have the same kind of force, and lighter at the top. So that's the first one. That's what I did with this one. I kept it fairly thick at the bottom, and then I'm just my typical something less than 1/4 inch at the top. The second tip I have for you is use a clay with a good wet strength. There's a million different kinds of clay. Find a clay that has a lot of wet strength. That's going to make it easier for you. Less chance of it trying to collapse, less time waiting for it to firm up. My third tip is be patient and let it firm up between courses. So sometimes, especially with a large form, and when you start getting up here and it's kind of wobbly, don't try to force it. Don't try to rush it. Put on a coil, pinch that coil up, and then walk away and let it dry. Let it kind of firm up for a half hour, 15 minutes. It depends on the weather in your area. It depends on your clay. So be patient. Give it time to firm up between coils. So that's what I was doing with this one. I would put one coil on, I'd let it firm up. I'd put another coil on. Sometimes when you've just pinched that coil up and it's kind of floppy, it won't support adding a coil to the top of it. It'll just fall over. So give it time to firm up before you're ready to add another coil. And the fourth tip I have is you can go back and work on the shape later. Not later like I'm going to refine the shape of this now. I couldn't get my hand down that neck to push out on this form. What I mean is when I was first coming up from the base, I tried to get the shape relatively where I wanted it, but the clay was stickier then. The form was kind of wobbly at that point. I didn't do the best job. But by the time I got up to, say, the shoulder here, I was able to reach in and refine the form of the lower portions much easier. And by the time I got up here by the neck, I was able to reach in and refine the shape around the shoulder area as well. So as you build, you might not be as nice a shape as you'd like, but later, as it starts to firm up, as it starts to dry a little bit, you can reach down in there and work on refining the shape then. Okay? Those are my 4 tips for if you're doing a large jar. Now I'm going to show you the rest of this process. I'm going to show you the smoothing, the slipping, the painting, possibly the firing. So stay tuned for that. Do you like making coil pottery? Are you trying to learn more about coil pottery? Or do you just enjoy watching people make coil pottery? I have a group that meets over Zoom every Wednesday night to make coil pottery. It's called the Ancient Potters Club. We get together, we make pottery, we chat, we have a good time, and we learn. Each month there's a different theme. Here's some examples of some of the work we've built in the last few months. Last month, our goal was to make a rattle bottom mug. This month, in August, we're gonna make a human effigy jar. It's called the Ancient Potters Club. We meet every Wednesday night via Zoom. It's a good opportunity to learn if you're interested in learning more about primitive pottery, especially if you're interested in ancient Southwestern forms. I'll put the link on the screen here and also below in the doobly-doo. So check it out. I hope to see you soon on the Ancient Potters Club. All right, I'm all done slipping and polishing. There's one small problem, and that is I have some small pock marks that you'll notice around here. And looking at what caused those, I've noticed that each one is where the polishing stone would stop. When I was polishing, I'd go back and forth, and each one of those pocks is at a stopping point where I would stop and go the other direction. So I think I polished too hard, too late, and this is something to remember for next time. But instead of trying to fix this, I think if I try filling those holes, and I could cause more problems, because I could cause other spalling around it. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint the design. I think once the design is painted, those are going to be very unnoticeable. I'm painting this with mineral paint. I'm going to use my manganese-based mineral paint. That way I can get a good black design even if I fire this in an oxidizing fire. A note on brushes, okay? Sometimes, as you've seen in my videos, I use yucca brushes. Other times I use store-bought brushes. In this case, I am using store-bought brushes because this is a big painting job. It's gonna take me a long time, and it's gonna be faster with store-bought brushes for me. The other thing I like to do is I like to freehand my designs. I don't like to draw them all out with pencil beforehand. So that's more important to me also than store-bought brushes. In my case, I place more emphasis on freehanding than I do on yucca brushes. Now, when you look at the design of this pot, it's very intricate. And you can look at it from different directions. You can look at it from the top down, and you've got kind of a 5-pointed star. Or you can look at it from the side, and you'll notice that line of spirals that circles the equator of the pot. And you gotta think, when you're going to lay these out, where did the original artist, where did the artist start? Where did they start laying it out? How did they put this down? Usually there's some framing lines that kind of set the areas, and then those are filled in with hatching or spirals or whatever the design elements are. In this case, there's no clear framing lines. So I looked, and you know, this is what I always do. I spend a good deal of time trying to understand that, just looking at the design and trying to understand the artist's approach to it, where they would have started, how they would have laid it out. Now, I think there's two ways to do this. You could start with that 5-pointed star coming down from the neck, working from the neck down, or you can start at the equator with those spirals and work up. There are 5 equally spaced spirals that are centered on the equator line of that pot. So what I did is I took a tape measure, I measured it out, I divided it into 5 equal parts, and I made a mark. I made a charcoal mark right in the center of where the spiral should go, 5 times around this jar. And those will be the center of my spirals as I lay it out. And hopefully then in the firing, that charcoal will burn away and leave me with no marks. And this may be the way they did it in ancient times. The other thing I've done is I've chosen a pookie of an appropriate size that I think will be about the right size for those spirals. So I'll be holding that Pookie up occasionally just to kind of gauge how big to make those spirals and try to center that on one of those charcoal marks. Okay, I want to show you what happened to this pot. The side that the camera was on looks pretty good, but if we come over to this side, we can see that it's kind of a mess. It's literally cracked into pieces, and as it cools, the sherds are just falling out of it. So it cracked really bad. Now this is probably not moisture. Moisture is usually more like spalls, and usually more explosive, like you can hear explosions in the firing, and I didn't hear any explosions. This is most likely thermal shock. So it was a bit windy while I was firing. The wind was coming from this side, the side the camera was on. So it was, this side got the least heat. The downwind side, the side that's broken, got the most heat, and that's the most broken. So probably needs a lot more temper. It's also a new clay to me, so I have done one little test firing with it. So more temper on this stuff, and also it may help to fire it in like a sagger or something to kind of keep the fuel away from the pot, and that'll kind of buffer it against some of those intense spikes up and down in temperature. Oops. This just emphasizes the first rule of primitive pottery. Well, any pottery really, just more so with primitive pottery because you have somewhat of a higher chance of failure. And that rule is don't become attached to the pottery until after it's fired. Don't become so emotionally involved in your pottery that you're heartbroken when it breaks. Do I feel bad? Yeah, I feel bad. Anytime you have this amount of labor into a project and it fails in the end, you're gonna feel bad. But you have to remember that it's not a finished piece of artwork until after the firing. And keep that in mind so you're not too broken up. If you are, you're not gonna do well in this craft because every time something fails, you're gonna take it to heart, you're gonna feel bad for a long time, it's gonna take you a while to get over it. So you just have to have the mindset that every failure is a learning experience. Of course, I don't feel terribly bad because I still have the results of my labor, and that is this video. So this video shows the whole process for making an Olla. The first time I've ever followed the whole process all the way through, from forming all the way through firing. And the process works to produce pottery that doesn't break as well. If you haven't seen any of my other firing videos, check them out. I'll put a link to one right over here. I have plenty of firing videos where the pottery comes out not broken. In fact, I have a very high success rate for outdoor firing. I fire great deals of pottery, especially in my workshops, and usually nothing breaks. This is just one of those things. Hopefully, this is a learning experience for you. It certainly was a learning experience for me. So I hope you got something out of it. It's a nice long video showing the whole process, and it has a good opportunity to learn something, especially at the end. So thanks for watching it all the way through. Give me a like if you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you next time.